Welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Senior Strength and Conditioning Coach at the U.S Olympic Committee, Tim Pelot. This episode of the Pacey Performance Podcast is sponsored by Valve Performance, the team behind the NordBord hamstring testing system. So the NordBord is the fastest and easiest, most accurate way to measure hamstring strength in under 90 seconds. So the NordBord gives you the right information so you can make the right decisions for your players at the right time. So it's already in use by over half the Premier League and dozens of other elite teams around the world. So the NordBord testing system is on its way to becoming the gold standard for measuring and monitoring hamstring strength. So if you are interested in getting to know anything more about the NordBord, you can visit Vald Performance, that's VALD performance.com, to find out more. Thanks for tuning in to episode 79 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. So just before we get started, I want to apologise for my horrendous cold-like voice. So I've got a very bugged up nose, so massive apologies for that. Today we've got Tim Pelot coming from, he came to us from Amsterdam. That's where the interview was taking place. He was doing some work out there. But he works at the U.S Olympic Committee, and we discuss everything from creating influence to mentors and management and leadership. So it was a really interesting chat with Tim, kind of not going down the really practical route, but something that really interests me at the moment with regards to leadership and management styles and how to create that within your environment. So I hope you enjoy the chat with Tim. As always, if you've got any feedback whatsoever for me, Tim, or the podcast as a whole, I'd love to hear that. So I'll get rid of this horrible voice. Enjoy episode 79 with Tim, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today we have Tim Pelot on the phone, coming from sunny Amsterdam, or by his recent tweet, cold Amsterdam. So just before I get Tim in, just want to thank him for his time on a Monday evening, and welcome to the podcast. So welcome to the podcast, Tim.
Well, thanks for having me, Rob. I appreciate you having the interest and inviting me to be here. I'm honored. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. So do you want to give us a little bit of an intro on yourself, maybe a little bit about your background and what you're currently doing, why you're in Amsterdam?
Yeah, no problem. I am the senior strength and conditioning physiologist for the United States Olympic Committee, and I've been in my role here since 2010. My primary responsibilities lie with the men's indoor volleyball team, beach volleyball, and the women's senior national team for water polo. And I'm coming to you right now from just a small city outside of Amsterdam called Zeist. We are here with my water polo team. We're here on a week of training. Next week, we begin a tournament that will decide our fate to make it to the Olympic Games. So this is we only have one and only shot to get the berth, to get the ticket to the games. And we're here trying to get it done right now.
So massive pressure for you guys. How are you as a strength coach, aiding the guys in kind of prep around the pressure side of things, as well as the physical side of things?
Well, I think, one of the things that maybe we can get into a little bit is my role. I like to say that I'm in the trenches. And I know a lot of strength coaches will talk about that metaphor. And typically, I think and I use that as well, they talk about it in the form of being in the trenches, being in the room and in the environment where, the athletes are grinding, they're sweating and they're working hard and they're investing boatloads of energy and effort into their physical development. But that is the world that I operate in, on top of traveling with the teams. So not only am I in the weight room, I'm on the sidelines and I'm at practice and I'm on the plane and I'm at dinner and I'm in video.
You're everywhere.
and I'm on the bus. And so part of that is a little bit different. I think when you're embedded within the sports and the teams that you work with, it gives you some interesting insight and some perspective on the athletes. So for me, my role, as you had asked, what is my role is in this time when intensity and pressure is at an all-time high, because we have 13 athletes that their lifelong goal is on the line, and coaches whose their career, not career by any means, but their performance is being judged as well, is on the line. My goal is to remove barriers and not create distraction, and to help out. And so if it's me picking up a bag, if it's me going above and beyond, it's me serving. It's finding ways to help take stress and strain off of the stress and strain of our situation.
One thing that interests me, Tim, is the fact that you've mentioned all them kind of situations where you are, and it's how you kind of separate yourselves and you separate yourself and you stay as a coach and don't flip into that kind of like almost friendship side of things. How do you manage that personally? Because I know from my personal point of view, first starting out in a football club, I found that quite hard, because I'd played football. The guys knew that I'd played football, so I kind of had that in common, that I'd been there, and I found it quite hard to make that adjustment to flip in and out of that. How do you go about that, being around them so much?
Man, that's a really fascinating question, to be honest with. And I say fascinating because it's been an evolution of mine, and part of one of my strengths that I believe is emotional intelligence. And I think that's one thing, if I could recommend to up and coming or future or aspiring strength coaches, is that it's very important to be smart in the things that we do. Your IQ is key, but your emotional intelligence will tell you a lot more when you're working with athletes, as in a full-time scenario or even in a part-time scenario. So for me, to answer your question, how do I keep that relationship, that coach-athlete relationship? Well, I think it comes down to two things. I think it comes down to being aware of the current situation, being aware, like let's say at a dinner, and topics get discussed, or how much do I get into this conversation, and I have to be careful with the things that I may say, or I need to, at some point, sometimes I just got to realize the best thing for me to do right now is just to walk away, to not get pulled into this. The other side of it is, I spend one of my big, and this probably goes into a little bit of one of our topics, is this idea of athletes who are willing to work for you versus athletes who are working because they have to. And I think one of my core values is to find ways to increase my influence with my athletes and their level of buy-in with me in the things that we do in the strength shop, is what we'll call it, versus me just telling them that they have to do something. So I'm not sure if that kind of dives in a little bit to that question and also into the next maybe arena there.
No, it does, mate. Yeah. And buy-in is kind of certainly was a big thing for me in an environment that wasn't the program wasn't particularly ingrained at the club where I was at. So obviously that's very different for you. But how are you kind of maintaining that buy-in and like you say, making sure that they're doing it because they want to do it, and you're kind of creating that environment rather than you telling them what to do. So giving them autonomy.
Well, I think I can sum it up in one quote that I came across many years ago, and then once I read it, it hit me like a ton of bricks, and it really has helped me in my process. And because, as I grew up in this profession, I have had a lot of, I've come up through 8 different mentors. Many of those were heads of departments. Some of them were at the USOC, some were them in different strength and conditioning environments. Others were not at the USOC or in strength and conditioning. They were biomechanists and exercise physiologists. And one of the things that I was really wrapped up in is a really intense science evidence-based model of training, which I believe in wholeheartedly. But one of the things that came across my radar was this quote, and the quote was, let's see if I can remember it. It goes, "The worst program in the world performed with high levels of energy and high levels of passion will outperform the most scientific, perfect program performed half-ass." And when you think about that quote, it's real. I mean, if you've been in the trenches and you've been with guys or girls and you had to lead an individual or a team of people, and you spend hours and hours writing your program, your model on whatever it may be, and then your guys show up or you show up to the facility and they could care less. Or maybe they don't care less. Maybe they're really excited about training, but they're not excited about training the way that you want them to train. And in the environments that I've been in, different strength shops all over the country, I have lived in about 7 different states in the past 10 years along my journey. And that was one thing, when I came across that quote, it rang true in every single scenario that I had been in. And so for me, my goal at that point wasn't about trying to get athletes just do what I wanted them to do on the day and get mad when they don't do it, because that's all it really does. Or is really to get to the point where understanding that I went to school and I have spent at this point 16 years in this field learning, trying to learn every day and trying to find more mentors and work with, try to find more colleagues to talk in the strength shop about or with. And my goal nowadays is just to try to get the athletes to value the training the way that I do, because they're not going to value it for the most part. I mean, you might have your 3%ers that that are going to really be overly excited and learn and want to do the training the way that you do. I think it depends upon the discipline that you work in, whatever sport that is. And if it's team-based sports versus some individual-based sports, I think some sports have a culture for training and others may not. And so you might have to be a driver when it comes to creating value around training that we are so passionate about creating. So that's where it all kind of stemmed from. So for me, it's about influence. So my goal is to find ways to gain more of it. I want to gain more influence because I want the athletes to do what I want them to do. I mean, at the end of the day, because my goal is to help them. It's not for me for them to do my science. It's for me to help them. So, in order to do that, if I don't have influence with them, it's not going to happen.
So how do you go about creating that influence?
Well, I mean, it's a really vast question with lots of content here, but I'll dive into a couple avenues. I think one of the things that we tend to do is we think about it as a Pavlov theory, where we hit the tuning fork and the dog salivates. We make the training, the athletes will do it. And I think that and our goal is to study the stimulus so that we can get the response. So for me, in that theory of being a good helper, is I don't know how I can help unless I ask questions. And so, years ago, I was a really smart guy, and I, had all this science that I was armed with, and we used to just go shooting, from the hip, and telling athletes they need to do this, and telling athletes they need to do this, and telling athletes they need to do this because I know what's better for you than you do. Now, this is strictly my environment, but what I learned is if I just start asking them questions and start with listening before telling, it really helps. It really helps get them to be much more interested in listening to you. It's as simple as that may sound, Rob, right? Like, it's simple, but the reality of it is we come in super hot and super heavy with all of our hard science, and we're the smartest guys in town, and we know about the body and training more than the sport coaches may. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if they're not willing to listen to us. Well, the first step is, we gotta listen to them because it's their body. And, maybe they don't want to get better, but we assume that they do. Yeah. So I think it comes back to relationship. And that's the foundation of influence. And and it comes back to getting to know that person before, thinking about them as being a laboratory experiment. And so for me, my goal in order to first step in creating influence is I've got to spend time. I've got to get to know them. I have to ask them tons of questions. I need to know a lot about them. And once they realize, and it sounds like rocket science right now, but it really isn't. But as soon as they realize that I'm interested in them, and I am interested in helping, because then at that point they're willing to listen to me. They know that I care about them enough to ask them questions. They know that I care about them enough so that I can make sure that I'm just not generating. And now the program that I might have written might be the exact same program that I would give them before talking to them. But for them, they don't know that until I have that conversation. So I think there's a step that I'm guilty here. So there's a step that I used to just miss out on. And over the course of my life and the course of my time in this field, I've found that my program results have been heavily influenced from the testing that we do to the medals that we win to the level at which my athletes, the athletes that I work with, embrace their training, have all been heavily influenced on me just having a relationship with them first, around them being a person, and me just being upfront and telling them and asking them, hey, how can I help you? What are we trying to do here? And then that's where it begins. That's where the spark happens.
Do you think that process could have been speeded up if you had been exposed to that kind of thinking during your education? Is that something that can be put in a undergrad MSc, or is it something that, I don't know, is it something that can you just figure out?
So one of the things that I aspire to do, and I work on this daily. I'm guilty, and I'm not great, and I need to be better. Is I try to be the best learner that I can, and what that means is I need to learn more science. I need to talk to people that are much smarter than myself. So I need to make myself vulnerable and tell people that I don't know everything, because I don't. I know the things that I know, and I'm very confident in them. And I have had, I've been somewhat successful in this field, but I'm also willing to tell people that I don't know it all. And I think that some people pride themselves on making sure that they let everybody know how much they know. And to me, that if I possess that mentality, that's a barrier that is created between me and my athlete. Because as soon as they realize that I'm human, then they immediately start to think, wow, okay, well, he's human too. He makes mistakes. He doesn't know it all, but what he does know, he's whatever it may be. To answer your question, I think the university and the college setting there's a challenge here, because we can't learn these kind of things in a classroom. The classroom is a situation where we're asked to pass or fail, or we're right or we're wrong. And I think when it comes to the hard sciences, which I'm a big advocate of, and I try to put my eyes into journals weekly, is in order for something to get published, it has to be right or it has to be wrong. It has to meet a certain criteria in order to make it to the process, the peer-reviewed process, in order for the data to be significant. Well, I don't operate in areas that's black and white. I don't operate in a world where everything is either perfect or not perfect. I operate in a world that's all gray. And on any given day, it's trying to make the best decisions on the specific day based upon the science and the evidence that I'm aware of or know of. And it's not pretty. It doesn't look as black and white or as right or wrong. And I think as soon as we can embrace that mentality or that thought process, we can gain that learner's mindset. And it's actually quite liberating because then you don't feel like you have to be the smartest guy in the room, and you find that it's okay to not know it all. And it's actually quite humbling, because the more people that I talk to, the more that it proves that there's just a lot more smart people out there than me. So to answer your question, can it be taught? It can be taught, but it has to be in an environment where people can get their feet wet and they can make mistakes. And it has to be in an environment where people can get feedback. And it has to be in an environment that can embrace failure and see failure as a positive. Fail-safe environments are one of the best learning hotbeds that we can all get into, because without failing, then we don't know that we need to make a correction.
Mm-hmm. So for the young up and coming coach, first or second job, obviously there's more people wanting to get into this industry than the jobs that it can provide that. Is there how are they going about putting themselves in that environment that is conducive to learning and going through the process that you've gone through? how can they make sure that they're choosing their right place of work rather than their place of work choosing them, and then finding out, oh shit, I'm kind of not doing anything here. I don't know. So that's more of a statement than a question, really. But how can the young coach make sure that they're in the right environment? And if they're not, how can that environment be changed for them to fulfill the potential as a coach?
Well, Rob, I'll start with I actually get approached very often, I don't know, almost on a weekly basis, with somebody who has a position available in some sort of collegiate, university, professional setting. This past year, it actually blew me away how many people were coming to me and asking me if I knew somebody. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, and everybody, not everybody, but most people will tell you, the common theme of it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that's just, it rings so true. I failed, and I learned a lot, back when I used to, not used to, but back when I was younger, because, and I'll follow up fully. I'm just kind of starting and prefacing here.
It's fine, mate.
I used to be the guy who wanted to chase the job title. I wanted the job title. I wanted to be the associate director. I wanted to be a director. I wanted to be seen as the head S&C. I wanted that. I thought that was what I wanted. And I started trying to find ways to make that happen. Well, as you start working your way through the food chain, if you will, you start realizing that maybe there's some positions that you thought you might want. Once you get them, they're not anything like you thought they would be. The responsibilities that you have, the people that you have to answer to, the role that you have, the amount of administrative stuff. I mean, if your goal is to be hands-on and be a coach, things just start to change that you don't put into perspective. The staff you have to hire, the managing the conflicts potentially within staff and keeping staff happy. There's just things that you just, that sometimes I think that stuff is fun now, but back then I wasn't I wasn't much into. So, and depending upon where you are, you could have the best job title in the world, but if you have a boss that is not a good leader, or you have to work along other staff members that are just, sticks in the mud, it could make your job horrible, terrible. You could go to work every day and hate everything that you do. And so for me, going back to your question, how do you get through that process? My suggestion is don't go chase the titles. My suggestion is, how does a young strength coach get into these worlds? It's not about knowing more science. I mean, if you've gone to school and you're passionate about the science, and you're prescribing your science and you're tuning your science, I think that's the other side. It's one thing to prescribe it, but are we relearning the responses that we're getting from what we're prescribing, and do we test and do we tune it moving forward? We got to be good learners of programming as well, not just in regards to our athletes, but other factors. And where I'm going is it's about chasing the right people. My journey put me in a path where I was very fortunate to position myself around some very highly influential people who were very, very smart, who were very established in this field. And because of my nature, I'm blessed, and I'm very fortunate for them. They laid the foundation for me, and all I tried to do was do a really, really stand-up job for them. And because of that, they helped me out. So for me, my recommendation to those is it's not about chasing job titles. It's not about chasing a franchise or a league or a team. It's about finding the right people that you can spend your time with, who are going to teach you and who are going to invest in you and who are going to, at some point when it's time to leave the nest, they're going to help you take that next step because they know people. And so for me, it's about, again, the root of it all. It just comes back to relationship.
So who were them mentors as you progressed, Tim?
Physiologist J.T. Kearney. I worked with under Lauren Landau, who's at Steadman Hawkins, or not anymore. He was with Steadman Hawkins. I worked with Patrick Borkowski and John Carlock. I opened a business, and I was fortunate enough to have an investor who was a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Wow. Who invested a lot of time and a lot of very seasoned experience in me. So it comes from a business world, it comes from a coaching world, it comes from a very scientific world, and that's kind of the word. I'm a product of that. I'm a product of my mentors, and not to say that I don't work really hard at being innovative and creative and creating my own things, but the mindset that I have is a product of those who showed me a little bit of the way.
How did the business mentor and the business side of things help you moving forward? Because that's something that interests me. I'm just wondering how that helped you along the way, and did it give you a slightly different perspective? Have you kind of tapped into that world a little bit more?
Well, the entrepreneurial side is always kind of a fashion. It's something that I have a little bit of that inside of me. I'm not sure at what point I'll pursue that. I did have a facility that I was running for a little bit of time prior to my re-engagement back with the U.S OC. But he taught me a ton. He taught me a lot about managing people. He taught me about leadership, and he taught me about how we can look at the ROI at the end of each month, and we can look at the numbers, and they can say one thing or the other. But at the end of the day, if the numbers say one thing, but the customers are happy and excited and very out there spreading the word like wildfire, well, the ROI this month might not be so good, but we're investing in different ways that 6 months and 10 months and 12 months from now are going to come back and that we're going to reap the benefit from. So the data, the crunching of numbers, when you look at those P&Ls, those profit and loss sheets, is really quite interesting, and just about investing in people. And I take that philosophy and that methodology, and I apply that to the world of strength conditioning, because my goal is to help and serve and make my athletes better. And I do it by investing in them, and investing in them in a way that I can help them. And that's usually in a very scientific thought process.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned there about leadership and management. I was having a conversation recently with someone about the kind of journey of a strength coach, and you've mentioned it just there, kind of going from an intern to an assistant, from an assistant to a lead, mm-hmm. lead to a potential management position. And I'm pretty much, well, I'm guessing, and I think I'm right. At no point in there is someone saying, this is how you manage people. But that coach does less coaching, and all of a sudden is in charge of potentially a number of staff. How have, mm-hmm. obviously, I'm looking at just one of my many stalking expeditions on Twitter and LinkedIn, looking at your job title with senior. I'm guessing that there's a mm-hmm. junior somewhere on there. How are you, and well, I suppose this goes into your past as well with the facility. How have you kind of learned that management of people?
Well, I think, you have to, and this is another philosophy, like when, let me step back here. Let me grab a thought. Give me a minute.
Go for it.
So let me describe leadership in this regard. So for me, and many, I'm sure there's many people that listen to your podcast that this might fall into their realm. We have different levels of sport. We have very developmental. We have, youth, developmental, collegiate, amateur, Olympic, professional, and, we can call it elite, non-elite, developmental, however you want to, reference it. But the athletes that I work with, if you were to take their sport and their discipline, they rose to the top. So for them, they're considered the leaders of their sport. And so for me, one of the things that is really important is when it comes to, it's one thing to work with somebody, it's one thing to influence them or lead them, but it's another when you're having to influence and lead leaders. And that's a whole nother animal. Those are really strong personalities, because the people in the world they operate in really gives them a lot of credit, and they give them a lot of, they get a lot of attention. And a lot of people don't give them things that they don't like. They give them things that make them feel good, and they make them, they give them lots of positive affirmations. So I think the thing when it comes to leadership and managing staff is that you got to understand who you're leading. And you have to, in order to lead somebody, you can't lead somebody if you don't know who they are. If you're a salesman and a family comes in and they're looking to buy a new car, and you see that they have 2 kids and one in the oven, you're not going to go sell them a 2-seater sports car. You're going to be walking over to the SUVs and the minivans. So for me, I take that approach with the athletes. I need to know about you. I need to know how I can serve you how I can lead you through serving you. And that's a whole, it's a whole concept of servant leadership. Because if I can gain your influence and I can serve you and fill your gaps and give you feedback that's going to make you better, and you're willing to take it because I'm not a threat to you and I'm not telling you what to do, because I respect you. If I can show you the respect, then it's usually pretty reciprocal. If I can give you respect, you're going to somehow respect me. But if I come in all hot and heavy, then it may not be that way. Trying to go back around to your topic here is, I think the concept of you were asking about staff. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it can be transferable to your team as well, to your athletes.
So I think one of my experiences is I had a lawyer or an esquire at one point in time who was my direct supervisor. And when that happened, he was all about checks and balances. He wanted to make sure that everything was covered. I needed to check in, I needed to check out, I needed to write down who I had conversations with, what athletes I worked with, what teams I spent time with, how many hours I spent with them, how many hours I spent talking to the coaching staff, how many hours, and who on the sport medicine staff that I talked to. So at the end of that week, I spent 2 hours recollecting all of the notes that I took all week long so that I can submit it in my report for the end of the week. I'll tell you what all it did was it drove me insane. And it really created a lot of angst in me toward that model and way of coaching people and trying to, because he was my supervisor. He could do 2 things. He could lead me and influence me to be better, or he could just let me do what I wanted to do and so-called manage me. But he had this micromanagement style. And one of the things that, to delve into is this idea of how we treat our athletes. So I think all of these philosophies that I practice and my methods are just are me making mistakes and me being a good learner of my environment. So the athletes that I work with, I'm very careful of how I manage the relationship that I have with them. So for me, I have, Rob, there are a lot of companies that want to give me products or that want to have me use their systems on my teams. And my first, one of the things that I have to take into consideration is how much control does this, I use the word control because that's what the athletes hear. That's what they see sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, am I doing something that is going to see it as I'm trying to control them? And one of the things that I'm aware of is that leaders don't like to be controlled. They don't like to be handcuffed. They like to be led, but they like to be respected, and they like to their opinion and their input. They want it to be heard, and they want it to be taken into consideration. And so for me, with elite sport and elite athlete, if I approach them in a way where I'm micromanaging them by getting on them every single minute about every single aspect of their day and trying to take away potentially some personal freedoms when it comes to the things that they eat. I mean, don't be wrong. Let me preface, like, through my relationship, I have a lot of influence, and I can make we do a lot of really positive things. But without that, if I just go through and start checking boxes and asking questions, what I end up with, and I've done this, over time, some of the information that I get may not be as accurate as I think it is. And I make decisions based upon that. So I'm not sure if you know where I'm going with that, but I think the biggest thing is, the methodologies and the strategies that we practice. If we want to turn athletes up, we want to get staff excited about, working under you. We want to get athletes excited about training with you and working with you. We have to be aware of our style and our approach and the way that we lead them or manage them.
Mm-hmm. Have you read a book called Drive, Tim?
I have not. I've read lots of books. This is like I was telling you, this is a pretty hot topic for me because it seems as if every time I hop on social media, or every time I hop on whatever, there's this new latest, greatest, and there's this new thing. Or if I'm not doing this, then I'm not training right. Or, you can't be successful without this. And to me, those are all Band-Aids trying to cover up a gunshot wound. Like it's not going to do anything. So for me, it's about influence. It's about being authentic, and it's about really being in it for the athlete. I have a lot of colleagues that are researchers, and we have researchers with the USOC, and they come back to me after every conversation they have with our researchers, because they want to know my opinion about that conversation, even though the leading expert in the field gave them the information. They don't care. They want to hear about what I have to say, and they want my opinion because they respect it more. So it's there you go.
No, and the reason I mentioned the book, just because it was recommended to me recently, and I kind of whizzed through it because it was great, and it mentions the 4 T's around autonomy, whether that be, it mentions staff, it's kind of management leadership book, but it can be also definitely replicated when it comes to athletes, and that's giving them task, team, technique, and time, giving autonomy around them 4. Obviously, there's a sliding scale on each one of them things, but I think it was really, it kind of hit home with me from a kind of professional point of view, but I can definitely see that from a kind of management of athlete point of view in allowing that certain amount of autonomy with them 4 things. So sorry to interrupt. Have you ever been in a situation where you have an athlete who doesn't have the right, the most positive lifestyle outside of the training environment? Yes.
Right. Or that they're going to go, drink a bunch of beers, after their match, and they just won, and their body is completely annihilated from the physiology level, and they're micro torn, they're completely nutrient depleted, they're completely dehydrated, and they're just going to go get ripped with the boys. for the next 6 to 8 hours, or you have somebody that you're working on body composition with and you're trying to get them to be leaner so that you can increase their power to weight ratio. And you find out that they just can't not have a cheeseburger every night of the week, or they want to drink a bottle of wine every night. So for me, I've banged my head against the wall by being the guy who's just trying to say no, 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 versus, hey, if I can get their buy-in and they know that I have their best interests, they're going to listen to the things that I say, and they may not do everything that I say, but at least they know that I'm in their head. And they're honestly going to probably make the right decision. So I can impact their behavior versus the immediate moment of, hey, don't eat that, slap your hand. Or they only make those decisions when they're around me at the training table. So we have, a lot of other professionals, service provider professionals that come in and they will talk to the athletes, but they do it in a very distant, non-relationship way, and it provides some of the greatest stuff when it comes to the scientific content that there is. But the athletes don't listen; they don't care, and it's not that. I mean, you and myself and everybody who's excited about exercise science and sports science would just gobble it up like it's nobody's business. But it's not about me. It's not about the sports scientists. It's about getting the information from us in a way that translates and transfers to the athletes so that they can make the decisions and they can do the right things so we can get the right responses that we're looking for.
Absolutely. No, 100%. Well, them people that, not saying that your guys in particular, but we've had, in the past, we've had people come in to talk, whether it be from a kind of psychological point of view. And you can see you can see the younger boys, especially the younger boys that I used to work with, thinking that guy's leaving in 10 minutes. I'm not going to see him for another 6 weeks. So
that's exactly right.
Why should I listen? And that wasn't necessarily the guy's fault. That was just the situation he was in with the club. But the lads didn't care about that. Like that, this guy rocks up every 4 weeks, tells us a bunch of stuff, and disappears.
And he's the international expert. He's probably got about 50,000 Twitter followers, and and I'm not even kidding. But they could, and honestly, that guy could care less about the athlete. He's more or that guy or girl is more interested in their profile and their street credibility, and or their presence and that they have. So, if the ones who have the relationships with the athletes will always see them as a trusted confidant. And they will approach the athlete about questions. I have athletes that come ask me questions if it's true or not when a sports psychologist or a sport dietitian, those aren't my fields. We have very specific people assigned to those teams and those sports. And those aren't, and I have to be honest with them, like, hey, I know a little bit about this. I have to defer to the expert, but they're coming to me after they just had a meeting with that person. And they do that because I have the relationship. So if you want to have the most impact and you want your training to take its full effect and you want the adaptation to take place, because that's what we're really into it for, right, Rob? We're not in it to stimulate and train the body. We're in it, we train because we're looking for the adaptation.
Absolutely.
We're not, if we want to just be scientists about about stimulus, we can do that. But at the end of the day, it's not the stimulus. It's the way that we respond to the stimulus. That's what we're looking for. And if we're not approaching the stimulus in the way that's going to give us the response, or there's things in the way that are not allowing us to achieve that adaptation, we need to figure out what that is.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, I could speak about this, about everything with you for another hour, but I'm just conscious of time, and I know
what time is it?
Amsterdam's an hour ahead, and I'm sure you've got an early start.
Yes.
So
yeah, we got to get up early.
Yeah, I'm just going to round it up, but I do really appreciate your insight, and I love how you think about things. So thank you for giving up 45, 50 minutes of your time to chat with me.
Rob, well, thank you for the opportunity. I hope I didn't bore you or offend you in any way.
No, like I say, we could carry this on for another hour, but I know you're going to get up early. But just before I let you go, where can people keep up to date with everything that you've got going on?
I try to do a little bit on Twitter. My handle there is tpelot7. I post things from time to time. A lot of the stuff that I'll post, I try to post it in a way that actually I got into social media because I wanted to connect more with my athletes. Mm-hmm. Oh. My athletes on Saturday and Sunday were sitting on their phone, and I wasn't with them. So I started using Twitter and Instagram to get to get in front of them. And so for me, sometimes I post things on those mediums, and some people, I do it for coaches, but for the most part, I do it for my athletes. But yeah, so you can find me there. I spend some time on that. So there you go.
Happy days. Well, we'll keep in touch. Enjoy Amsterdam.
Right, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good luck for the rest of the week.
Yes,
and
thank you.
We'll speak soon.
Sounds great. Thank you. Have a good evening. And again, thank you. I'm honored to be able to talk and share just my perspective.
Appreciate that. Thanks, mate. Speak soon.
Thank you.
Bye, mate.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks again for tuning in to episode 79 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. As I said at the start, if you have any feedback whatsoever for myself, Tim, or the podcast as a whole, I'd really appreciate you firing it over, whether it's a direct message on Twitter, an email, whatever it may be. I want to, again, make the podcast better for the listeners and just increase the service that it provides, really. So thanks again for your support. Got some great guests coming up over the next weeks and months, and I will see you in episode 80.